When you listen to enough true crime stories, you start to notice a pattern, not in the crimes themselves, but in what gets left out. Most stories focus on what happened at the end, the arrest, the confession, the sentence. But very few stories slow down long enough to ask what was already broken before the violence ever happened. That's why I want to talk about this case, because this one isn't loud, it isn't fast, and it doesn't resolve cleanly. It sits with you. Welcome to Still Frames, a podcast where we slow real stories down, strip away the noise, and sit with the moments that changed everything. My name is John, and here we explore real-life cases from the past, stories that are closed, documented, and widely discussed, focusing on what is known, where the conflict lived, and what these stories reveal about human choices and consequences. If this is your first time here, you're welcome. And if you appreciate calm, thoughtful storytelling, you can subscribe and stay. In 1989, Donna Callahan was working a late shift at a convenience store in Florida. She was young, she was pregnant, she was already a mother. That night, she was abducted from her workplace. She didn't make it home. She was later found murdered. Mark Reby and his brother were arrested. Mark Reby pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison. From a legal standpoint, the case was over. But psychologically, it was just beginning. After being incarcerated, Mark Reby began confessing to more murders. Not one or two, 13. 13 women, most of them small, young, vulnerable, who had gone missing across Florida over several years. And here's where things get complicated. Because these weren't vague claims. He gave details, he named locations, he described circumstances. In some cases, investigators said he knew things only the killer would know. And for the families who had waited years for answers, this mattered. For them, this wasn't curiosity, this was hope. I want to pause here, because this is where most podcasts speed up. They jump straight to the question, was he lying or telling the truth? But that's not the most important question yet. The more important question is this: what happens to people when answers are offered and then taken away? Because after years of confessing, Mark Reby changed his story. He recanted. He said the confessions were false. He claimed investigators pressured him, guided him, fed him information. He said he confessed out of fear. Fear for his son, fear of consequences, fear of things he believed were being held over him. And suddenly, everything collapsed again. Families who thought they finally knew who killed their daughters were forced back into uncertainty. Some parents had already died believing Reby was responsible. Others were left asking whether they had mourned the right truth at all. And here's where I want to be very clear. Even if Mark Reby was lying, real harm was done. Because truth isn't just about facts, it's about responsibility. At one point, Reby contacted the father of a missing woman directly and told him he had killed her daughter. That father died shortly after. He never got clarity. Never got certainty, never got peace. Whether that confession was true or not doesn't change the damage it caused. That matters. Listening to Mark Reby speak, there's something that keeps surfacing: control. He controls the pace of conversation, he redirects questions, he reframes accusations. He presents himself as misunderstood, manipulated, and mistreated. Sometimes he accepts responsibility, sometimes he rejects it completely. That inconsistency isn't random, it's power. Because when someone controls the narrative, they control how others feel, especially people who are desperate for answers. What stands out to me isn't just the possibility that he killed more women, it's the possibility that he understood exactly how much influence his words had and used that. There's an investigator in this case, Dennis Haley, who spent decades trying to untangle these confessions. Years of revisiting evidence, years of walking sites, years of listening and re-listening to statements. Some people say he became obsessed. Others say he refused to give up on families who had nothing else. And honestly, both might be true. This case sits in that uncomfortable space where persistence and fixation blur together, where belief can drive investigation but also distort it. And that brings me to what I think this story is really about: fear, silence, and delayed truth. Whether Mark Reby is responsible for one murder or many, the psychological damage didn't begin with violence. It began with avoidance, with manipulation, with half-truths offered when it was convenient and withdrawn when they weren't. People like to imagine monsters as obvious, loud, chaotic. But some harm is quiet. Some harm looks like withholding clarity, like offering answers without accountability, like letting other people carry uncertainty while you retain control. This case doesn't resolve cleanly. It doesn't end with certainty. And that's exactly why it matters. Because not all damage is physical, and not all violence leaves marks you can see. Still Frames exists to sit in these spaces, not to accuse, not to sensationalize, but to slow down and examine the psychological fractures that allow harm to spread quietly, over years, across families who never asked to be part of the story. The court case is closed, but the consequences aren't. And maybe the most uncomfortable truth here is this. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a person can do isn't commit violence. It's control the truth while others are left searching for it. Thank you for listening. And I would also love to know what your thoughts are in the comment below.